So welcome to this training session on Microsoft Teams. During this presentation, we're going to be talking about what Teams is, how it works, and we're going to start thinking about some of the ways in which we can use it as part of our teaching and learning. So Microsoft Teams is a platform which functions on all of these devices that you can see in front of you now. Which has the advantage that it does provide a fairly consistent experience for students. It's a platform which is growing in use. It's the fastest growing Microsoft platform of all time. And it is increasingly dominant in the workplace. Microsoft are happy to provide lots of statistics which are part of their marketing, but even independent research seems to demonstrate, as you can see here, that Microsoft Teams is going to become a more important workplace tool in the future. So it's quite a handy thing to get our students using it in preparation for the workplace. In terms of what Teams does and how it works, you've got a little screenshot here of what Teams looks like, which I'm hoping most of you are already familiar with. The main functions that you'll find within Teams are those of communication. You can see that you can create chats and have chats just like a kind of a social network like WhatsApp or Facebook Messenger or anything like that. You can create meetings with people, so you can have one-to-one chats. During those meetings, you can also have them as video calls. And you can make calls directly through Teams, so you can use it like a telephone if you wanted to. You can make voice calls as long as you have a microphone. You can also collaborate with people. So rather than, if some of you are familiar with using cloud storage, Google Drive or Dropbox or anything like that, where you tend to put a file up and other people can see that if you share it with them. In Teams it works the same way. You put your files in the Files tab, but you can collaborate with people on those documents live in Teams, and you can communicate with people around those documents. So rather than just having a document there that people have to look at, people can make comments and discuss those documents. You can extend Teams with third-party apps. Perhaps the one that we are most likely to encounter will be the Moodle app integration, which, as far as I know, still isn't quite ready yet, but we're hoping it will be ready soon. There are hundreds of other apps that you can add into Teams, but I should warn you that most of these are not really going to be available because any technology that we use has to be compliant with GDPR and data regulations and data protection and all this kind of stuff, and that makes it quite difficult to use things that haven't been checked and cleared. So although you might find lots of stuff that says, hey, you can plug in all of these kinds of things, don't particularly expect those to be available at UEL immediately. And finally, it does work within a compliant, safe, secure environment. Like with all Microsoft products, it sits very comfortably behind all of the protections that we have. So anything that we do in Teams, we know is secure, we know is protected, we know is data compliant. It does produce all sorts of analytics and reports, again, most of which we can't particularly get our hands on at the minute, but some of those are going to be becoming more available to us as it develops as a platform. Microsoft's own presentation has a heading that says it's designed for education, but of course it isn't. It's designed as a workplace environment. It's designed as a workplace tool, but they are pushing for it to be used more in education, and to that end we have, as you can see in this slide, the ability to create a classes team, which is a team site which is specifically for teaching and learning. How do you know that it's a classes team? Well, unlike the other kinds of teams that you can see here, the PLC, staff members, or just anyone teams, you have distinct roles. You have a teacher and student role. So you can assign a student role to somebody, or you can assign a teacher role to somebody. You also have a class notebook file which is great if you like OneNote. If you haven't used OneNote or don't like it, then it's not going to mean much to you. You also have the ability to add assignments and create private channels and things like that. So there's a few options in the Classes tab which make life easier for us. These things, again, Teams is a developing platform, so even since I put together this presentation and added these notes, things have changed. The one thing I will say is that if you're not using OneNote, you can't delete OneNote from the Classes tab, so it's probably a good idea not to activate it when you see it. Perhaps the greatest strength of using Teams is its capacity for online meetings. It largely works if you're familiar with using Skype before. Teams works pretty much the same way, but is quite significantly improved on some of the things that Skype does. So you can have live events with up to 250 concurrent participants all joining into a live streaming broadcast. You can have spontaneous meetings where you just decide to invite 4 or 5 people to join a meeting, or you can have scheduled meetings with lots and lots of people joining at any one time. All of these meetings are video and chat. You can share slides, you can share documents, you can work on documents, you can have an interactive whiteboard, you can have all these wonderful things, and you can record them, and once they're recorded, they are uploaded directly into Streams. You can access those videos directly in Teams, but if you go to Streams, you'll find that there are options for a full transcription of that video recording, that meeting or that lecture. And there's the capacity to add interactions into that video if you want, much like Panopto. And in many ways, the ease with which you can record yourself or record lectures or record meetings in Teams renders Panopto perhaps less important than it has been in the past. So, just looking through some of the features, you can see here the general layout of how Teams works. Again, I'm hoping that most of you are already familiar with this, but you can see, if I'm right, here we go, on the left hand side we have our main menu panel. The Activity tab will show you your most recent activity. It's like the Facebook live feed. It's whatever is the last event that's happened in any of your teams. You can see a list of them there. The Chat tab is where you see your conversations. You can have chats and conversations with people outside of Teams. Just type in their name and send them a message and they can reply. And you can see the history of those tabs, of those chats there. The Teams tab gives you the list of all of your teams. You can see teams that you're already a member of, or you can join or create a team. The Meetings tab is synchronized with your Outlook calendar. So if you create a meeting in your Outlook calendar, it will appear in your Teams Meetings tab. If you create a meeting in your Teams app, it will appear in your Outlook calendar. With both those meetings in Outlook or in Teams, you have the option to choose to have that meeting as an online Teams meeting, in which case it will generate a link for that specific meeting. You can invite people to join the meeting, or you can send them that link and they can join from outside of the team or outside of the university. The Files tab gives you all of your files that you've stored, or everything that you've uploaded into your various files, teams. The Assignments tab is where you can track, if you've given assignments to students, you can track where those assignments are and who's submitted into them. If you are a student and you've been given some assignments, this is where you can track which ones are due and when. The More tab gives you the options for those third-party apps, most of which, again, we don't particularly have much access to right now, but there are things that you can add into your tabs if you want to. And there's the store where you can go to external apps as well. This is the list of teams. In this view, it is just a list. You can see that I've got a team for Language Arts 102, Algebra 101, Language Arts 101, the chess team and the test team. I can flick between all of these. Inside each one, you have what are called channels. So inside Language Arts 2, there's a general channel where we have general conversations and chat. There's a specific channel, Elements of Fiction group, and that's where we discuss elements of fiction, and so on and so forth. You can change the view of this from a list to a grid format if you want, depending on your preferences. Now this is the canvas. This is the main place where those conversations take place. You can see here that we are in Language Arts 101 team, and we are in the general tab, the general channel. And here you can see conversations which have taken place. Along the top, you can see different tabs that you can add into this channel. By default, this channel will have a Files tab, so that anything that you attach to a conversation, you can drag a Word document, you can drag an image file, you can drag a PowerPoint or anything like that, and it will be saved into that tab, that Files tab. The class notebook, again, is your OneNote tab. If you're using OneNote, then you can access that. If you're not using OneNote, just ignore it. The assignments tab, you can create assignments. One thing that's important to note is that assignments in Teams are not anonymous. If you are using, or if you want to create summative assessment, you should still look to do that in Moodle, where an anonymity is still available. But you can add other tabs yourself. You can add websites, you can add spreadsheets or PowerPoints as other tabs, you can add links to YouTube videos or whatever. In the main conversation strand, you can start a new conversation by just typing in the box underneath there. And of course, you can add attachments, or you can expand to add rich text. And you can click on the video icon to create a Meet Now to start a meeting at any point. The command box up at the top gives you the option to type in specific commands if you know the particular shortcuts. I've been using Teams for a while and I still can't remember any of the shortcuts. It might be that there are things that you do very frequently that you can remember the shortcuts for and just type them in there. But you can search for particular teams, search for channels, you can search for files or whatever using the command box at the top. Teams does function as a hub for all of your Office 365 apps. So it links with Outlook, it links with Word, Excel, PowerPoint, OneNote. In the Files tab in a team site, you can create Word documents, Excel documents or PowerPoint documents, and you can work collaboratively with others in your team on them. You can embed forms, you can embed sways, you have a SharePoint site which is connected to it, and so on. All of these are available by logging in online to your Office 365 account. You'll see Teams is available on Office 365, and you can open Teams in your web browser, or you can download it as a desktop application as well. Okay, now we've talked about how Teams works, we're going to actually look at it in action. This is Teams, as you can see here. I'm in the activity feed here, and you can see that it's a feed of all the activity in all of my teams that I'm available on, and all of the conversations and chats that I've been having with various people. And you'll see things like even somebody who's given a little thumbs up to a message that I've posted. I'll see that in my feed here. I can switch the feed from everybody to just my activity. This is the stuff that I've done, the stuff that I've posted. This is the chat tab. You can see these are the conversations that I had. I had a conversation here with my colleague Christina. We had a little video meeting and then we posted some files with each other. I could reopen this conversation by typing in a message here now. I'll come back to show you more about that later on. I can also navigate between my contacts, and I can filter my contacts or add contacts to this group using that. But generally speaking, if you want to create a chat, you can click on the little chat icon up at the top, start typing the name of the person you want to message, and their chat will appear in the window. This is the Teams page. You can see that this is one of my teams which is available here. You can click on all teams to see all of your teams in this grid format, as you can see, you can switch between the different teams here. Now this is a demonstration team, and here we've got our channels. We've got an example channel and an example private channel. To create a channel, all we need to do is to click on the little ellipsis next to the team name and click on Add Channel. I can give the channel a name, and this is an important bit. This is where I can choose the accessibility of the team. By default it's set to standard. This means that anyone who is a member of this team will have access to this channel, but I can change it to a private channel, which means that only a specific group of people within the team can access this. Now that's particularly handy if you want to create study groups or if you want to use group work in your course. In order to change the members for a team channel, click on the three dots and manage channel, and you can add members. Note that this will only search for people who are already a member of the team. So if there's somebody you want to add to a private channel, you'll have to add them to the team first. You can manage the members of your team by clicking on the three dots next to the team name and clicking on Manage Team. You get the same window and you get the people who are members. I can add members by just clicking on the Add, and this, being a class team, gives me the choice of adding people as either students or teachers. I can change whether somebody is an owner of the site. In other words, they're able to add tabs, add channels and add contents by changing their role from member to owner. To add conversations or to post anything into your team, all you need to do is to click in this bottom window here and start typing. You can add emoji, you can add GIFs for, again, whatever reason you might want to. If you click on this little A icon down here, it will expand and give you all of these options for adding a subject and for changing the type. You can add links, you can add quotes, you can embed content, you can do all these kind of normal things that you might expect to be able to do. The other thing that you have the option to here is you can change it from part of a conversation to an announcement. And if it's an announcement, it has a nice big heading where you can say, this is really important, read now. And you can add a background image. And that will send it as an announcement. Notifications are important here. You might know that if you're used to using things like WhatsApp or Facebook or Twitter, whenever you are mentioned, you get a notification. And the same thing works here. So this announcement, which I've just posted, will be available to everybody to see, but they won't necessarily get an announcement to say that it's here. What I can do to make sure that everybody gets this message is I can mention them. If I type in the @ symbol, these are the people who are members of this account, and I can say that I want test student 2 to make particular note of this message. And test student 2 will now get a notification to say that they have been mentioned and there's a message for them to see. I can also mention the entire team if I want a notification to go to everyone in the team. So, demonstration. The team comes up and I can add the team. And a notification will now have gone to that whole team. And you can see that it's indicated just by that little icon. The team demonstration team was mentioned. To start a meeting with the team, just click on the little camera icon and you get the Meet Now options. Oh, look, there's me. Oh dear, I do apologise about that. I can either meet now, I can add a subject, my Teams thing, and click on Meet Now. And there it is, there's my ugly face. In here, I can start recording this meeting. If I want to make sure that I have a record of it, I'll start recording it, and don't worry, I'll delete it later on. I've got my list of participants up on the right-hand side with whom I can start a conversation. Woohoo! And I can also share different windows. So you can see I've got my PowerPoint over here. If I wanted to share my PowerPoint in this conversation, I can click on it and it's now sharing my PowerPoint within the team. If I come back here, I'll stop sharing and it's back to my ugly face again. I can add participants to this conversation just by inviting somebody. Say there's somebody who I want to be a part of this conversation who isn't actually in the team. I can invite them and it's calling them, and I'm going to hang up before he answers because that will be quite embarrassing. Okay. Now the team has been recorded. It's saving that recording to Microsoft Streams, and so you'll see the video of that conversation appear here in a moment. But just before we get back onto that, and I apologise because you're going to see my ugly face again, if I didn't want to meet now but I wanted to arrange a meeting for another time, I can schedule the meeting, I can give it a title, and I can choose my time. I can add who I want to appear, either as required attendees or optional attendees. By default, if I've created this meeting in a team, all of that team is invited to it. I can add the location if I want to. I can add whether I want it to repeat. So if it's a lecture, it might occur every week at the same time. And I can use my scheduling assistant, which again links in with Outlook to check my availability for that meeting, and when it's ready I can click on send. Now when I go into calendar, you'll see that that meeting appears in my calendar here. If I open it, I'll see that there is a link to join the meeting. If I want to just send this to people or make this link available, maybe put it onto Moodle so people can access Moodle, I can just copy the link, and yeah, that's Santanu there who obviously got my message, and so I'm going to send him a quick message back. So I've told him to ignore me. Okay. So I can copy this link, I can paste this into an email, I can paste it into Moodle or anywhere I want, and people can click on that and they will get effectively the same as this, a join button, which if they click, it will take them to the lecture, and there's my ugly mug again, and I can join. Here's another interesting, nice little thing. This blurry background, look at that, isn't that great? I've got this wonderful background behind me now of I don't know if you can see a manky old fan and some books and things like that, and if I had I remember once doing a recorded podcast for my students, and because my wife makes artificial arms and legs, there was an artificial arm on a bookshelf behind me, which frankly freaked quite a lot of people out. If I had something like that in the background, I didn't want people to see it, I can click on this little thing and it will blur out the background. You can see it does a fairly good job of that actually. Woohoo! Ah! Okay. In the microphone, you've got microphone setups. You can choose your different microphones if you've got one. You do need a fairly decent microphone for this to work. If you're using a mobile device, your phone will obviously have a microphone in it. In any case, your laptop computer will probably have a camera and a microphone in it if you want to use either of those. In the custom setup, you can choose your different devices. You can make a test call, just make sure that everything is working. You can also, and this is quite useful, this is a fairly new thing which has been added to Teams directly as a result of requests from people wanting Teams to work a bit more like Zoom. You can add breakout rooms for different people. Now, I haven't particularly looked at this yet, but so this is a fairly new thing that's only just appeared. Breakout rooms, if you're running a lecture and you want to send people off to have a different discussion and then maybe come back to the main meeting at another point, you can do that using the breakout rooms. We'll find out more about that as we go along. Calls. This is where you can use this to make telephone calls to people. Again, all you need is a microphone and a speaker or headphones, and you can use it just as you would an ordinary telephone call. Here's the files. This is everything which has been uploaded into all of my Teams, all the documents everywhere. I'm not entirely sure what the benefit of it is, but the nice thing here is that I have a direct link to my OneDrive. So this is all of my OneDrive files. I can edit in Teams, edit directly in Teams, and so on and so forth. Okay. Back in the main channel, we've got our OneNote file. Now, we need to click on the button to set up the OneNote class notebook if we're going to be using it. If you're not going to be using it, then probably not a good idea to click on this button, because otherwise it might confuse students. But if you are intending to use OneNote, then you can activate it by clicking on that button. In the Assignments tab, you can create assignments, you can create a quiz, or you can create an assignment. The quiz is a little bit complicated because you have to create the quiz first of all in Microsoft Forms, then you have to search for it within here. So as you can see, I've got various quizzes which are already part of my Microsoft Forms profile. These are just my personal forms. You can't create quiz forms in a shared platform. They all have to be into your own personal area. So it's not particularly helpful if you want to share these assignments with other people. However, if I were to add a time management quiz, I can assign it to all students or choose which students I want to assign it to. I can enter instructions if I want to, and then assign. And you can see that that assignment is now showing in my assigned assignments list. The grades for the assignments are always available from the Grades tab. Students will be able to see their own grades, and you can see those of your students. From the assignments, I can see that 0 of 3 have been handed in so far. If I click on them, I can see that these are the 3 that have not been handed in. If they were to appear here, I would be able to click on them, open the quiz, and give those a grade. I can change the assignment by clicking on Edit Assignment, and I can see what students would see by clicking on Student View. So this is what a student would see. They click on the quiz, and it would take them through the quiz in Microsoft Forms. I can add other tabs by clicking on this little plus button here. So these are the list of some of the other tabs which you can add. You can add a YouTube video, you can add a wiki, you can add Poly, which is, what do they call it? Which is online polling. You can add a Planner tab, which is kind of like a fairly basic version of Trello. There are other apps which are available. You can click on the Managed Apps list here to get the full list of apps, and you can click on More Apps by clicking on More Apps, obviously. Now, most of these, you can try to install them and they won't work because they haven't been approved. But if there is anything that you particularly want to have access to, then do contact IT and ask them for it, and they'll see if it does comply with our data protections in order to be able to be used. And that's pretty much it. That's everything that we've seen. Just to go back to our recorded meeting earlier, you can see that that now exists as a recording. I can click on that and play back this rather embarrassing meeting. There's my ugly mug. And I can view this in Microsoft Streams by clicking on the little Streams tab there, or by clicking on the three dots next to the meeting and open in Microsoft Stream. And in Microsoft Streams, the transcript obviously hasn't been generated yet, but the transcript will appear as a tab here. But I can add different forms and quizzes and interactivity to the timeline by using the interactivity tab, which is very similar to the interactivity tab in Panopto. So one of the questions which we might want to ask ourselves when we think about what we can do with Microsoft Teams is how it differs from other things that we might use. What particular advantages does it give us as an educational tool? As I mentioned at the start of this presentation, Teams isn't designed primarily as an educational tool, not in the same way that Moodle is. But it does provide things which Moodle doesn't provide. There isn't a great deal of research which exists to examine properly the impact that Teams can have on education. There is research which is focused on more social environments. And one of the things which has been identified is that there presently exists a gap between the potentialities of Web 2.0 technologies and pedagogical practice. In other words, the way we teach still largely echoes the behaviourist approaches to education which have been dominant for the last 100 years or so. Web 2.0 has changed the landscape of how people find information, how people use information, how people communicate with each other. And a lot of that revolution is not being leveraged by the more traditional ways in which we teach and practice teaching and learning. So it's a good idea to think about the nature of contemporary technology, the stuff that we use every day on our mobile phones, and see the contrasts between that technology and the methodologies of traditional pedagogy. It's also helpful to think about the broader contexts of social media and how social media can fit in to pedagogies of constructivism and more conversational frameworks for education. So what can we do in this kind of technology which we can't do in other forms of technology? If you want to know what the definition of Web 2.0 is, it refers to websites that emphasize user-generated content, ease of use, or participatory culture and interoperability. I got that quote from somewhere and I can't remember where I got it from, so there's no reference for it. Constructivist theories blend beautifully with technological affordances provided by social media. Why is that? How does constructivist approaches work better with something like Teams than it might do with something like Moodle? If you're not sure what constructivist theories are, here I do have a quote which I have referenced from Pritchard. Constructivists view learning as the result of mental construction. That is, learning takes place when new information is built into and added onto an individual's current structure of knowledge, understanding and skills. We learn best when we actively construct our own understanding. Now, what that suggests is that if we sit in a lecture theatre and have somebody at the front who tells us what we should understand, that's less effective than if we are given the tools to go away and build our own understanding. Moodle works in a much more behaviourist way. It is a place where you can provide instructor-led content. Teams, by contrast, doesn't work well with instructor-led approaches to teaching and learning, but it does work well with collaborative or communicative ways of teaching and learning. It allows you to give students tools and allows them to use those tools to build their own understanding. The advantages of Teams lie in its ability to support the idea that knowledge building is a collaborative process achieved through seamless conversation and shared ideas among students in a learning community. In this sense, it might be useful for us to develop our notion of what a learning community is, or a community in learning, with reference perhaps to the community of inquiry framework. If you've not heard of the community of inquiry framework, here's a definition of it. This is from Matthew Lipman. Thus, we can now speak of converting the classroom into a community of inquiry in which students listen to one another with respect, build on one another's ideas, challenge one another to supply reasons for otherwise unsupported opinions, assist one another in drawing inferences from what has been said, and seek to identify one another's assumptions. A community of inquiry attempts to follow the inquiry where it leads, rather than be penned in by the boundary lines of existing disciplines. A dialogue that tries to conform to logic, it moves indirectly like a boat tacking in the wind. But in the process, its progress comes to resemble that of thinking itself. It is a mistake to think that the creation of effective online courses is a matter of simply transferring classroom content, assignments and exams to a web-based setting. This is something which is quite easy to do in Moodle. We take our lecture notes, we take our PowerPoints, and we drag and drop them into our Moodle course, and bang, we think we've got online learning. We don't. It's not a designed environment, it's a repository of stuff. It's no different to walking into the library and just being told to get on with it, without any reference, without any pointers. In Teams, the fact that when you upload content you can generate discussions from it mean that you're not just providing content, you're using that content as a stimulus for further activities. Truly engaged online learning is instructor-facilitated and student-owned. I love this because this takes a lot of the weight of responsibility away from us as educators. When we walk into a classroom, I remember when I started teaching and I walked into the classroom, my biggest anxiety was that I was expert enough in my subject to have the right to be standing there in front of those students. The onus and the responsibility was mine to be much more knowledgeable and expert than my students were, and to have something valuable for them. Moodle still works along those similar behaviouristic lines because it means that you are responsible for providing the core information to a group of largely passive learners. In Teams, Teams works best when it is instructor facilitated and student owned. That means there is less of an onus on us being the experts, that students aren't coming to Teams to sit there passively to listen to us. It's a place where people come to converse. And if we have any fears that our own expertise and knowledge of how to use Microsoft Teams might be less than that of our more social network friendly students, then this turns that fear into a strength. If the students are the ones who start to take the lead with how your Microsoft Teams site is used, how it functions, and you are there to provide advice and support and facilitation as and when it's needed, then what's happening is what is suggested is the best way to use Teams for teaching and learning. It is a way in which students lead on that use. There are tons of resources that we have available and that IT have created for you to use Teams effectively in your teaching and learning. Here I'm on the intranet site, the IT intranet site, and you can see that there's an entire page here on how to teach remotely, what hardware you need, what software you need, and how you can use it effectively. If you want to know more about how to use Teams, but specifically if you click on Digital Training and then on Microsoft Teams, you'll see video guides on all of the major functions which I've already demonstrated for you, and a Teams interactive demo which is a wonderful way to get yourself up and running with Teams. It's a little walkthrough that just takes you through all the different parts of the Teams site. If you do have any other questions, do let us know.